Thank you, everyone, for coming out today to join our group author reading. This reading is brought to you by Strong Women, Strange Worlds, which is a group of authors supporting authors. Our mission is to elevate the voices of women and non-binary authors of science fiction, fantasy, and horror through events like our bi-monthly virtual QuickRead series. You can find out more about Strong Women, Strange Worlds in the handout that's going to be provided in the chat, and by visiting our website. This link will also appear in the chat, strongwomenstrangeworlds.weebly.com. I would also like to take a moment to thank those who have made a tip jar donation. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. I'm your host today, Elaine Isaak. You can find out more about me in the provided handout as well. Please note, recording of the session by the audience is not allowed. Recording of electronic communications, including Zoom meetings and webinars, without permission is illegal. Today, we will be featuring 6 authors: Fiona Moore, Ioanna Papadopoulou, Jennifer L. Hart, Valerie Valdes, Shveta Thakrar, and Anne E.G. Nydam. Each author will have 8 minutes to read. Our first reader today is Fiona Moore. Fiona Moore is a BSFA award-winning queer Canadian author whose work has appeared in Asimov's, Clark World, Interzone, and 6 consecutive editions of The Best of British SF. She lives in London, England, with 2 cats who are bent on world domination. Fiona, take it away.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was just about to start the chapter, and here we go. This is chapter 3 of Rabbit in the Moon. The general turned and smiled. For no good reason, Ken found himself thinking of larvae, white, glistening, silent. Kenichi Uzagi, Ken, he said, brandishing his press pass upward a little desperately while trying to keep his balance on the unsteady aluminum dock. A small knot of NCOs with clipboards, responding to an unseen signal from the general like deer to the scent of a wolf, silently and quickly moved out of her orbit. War correspondent with Iqaluit Online News. The general nodded. Ken had an impression of short blonde hair, muscular body, plain uniform, not much different to the ordinary troops, but tailored and pressed. Then you're the biotech expert. She moved off. Ken glanced helplessly back at the soldiers who had escorted him out from Albany, New York to the Detroit front. Al was studiously tending to the baggage, his pudgy face pursed as he heaved rucksacks out of their boat with unhurried ease, but Captain Manders gave him a small, fluid nod to indicate he should follow the general. I don't know that expert is really the word, ma'am, Ken said. Mistake, he wondered. He remembered his mail.com. Problem with you, Ken. You're not assertive enough. I've had some experience. SIC called ahead. They said you're an expert, and that makes you the expert. The general was striding off, clearly expecting Ken to follow her. Ken was also aware that Manders was keeping within earshot stealthily and tried not to think of how ridiculous the whole thing must look. The tall, muscular general, pursued by a skinny, pale young man with an unkempt black ponytail, and a lean, seam-faced warrior in a worn-out uniform unhurriedly bringing up the rear. Ken started, awkwardly, to try and explain the misunderstanding. How he'd had an accidental encounter with a bunny girl, one of the strange cyborg creatures which were turning up on battlefields where the seaboard states and the red states fought it out over increasingly scarce water and land reserves. An encounter which, unlike most of the people in that position, he'd actually survived. How he'd been approached by a member of the Seaboard Intelligence Corps and tasked with finding out what the cyborgs were and who was sending them. And how he'd been under the impression that the fact that the bunny girls were more than just a rumor spread by exhausted and traumatized soldiers was a closely guarded secret, even in intelligence circles. I'm certainly not any kind of expert. But the general wasn't listening. She paced mightily away from the gleaming new loading dock, heading with practiced steps towards a gray concrete and rust hulk. Beyond the river, the sparse vegetation gave way to the chilly sand of the desert. As they approached the building, Ken realized first that it had once been a factory of some kind, and second, that it was now the local Seaboard Army headquarters. Deprived of its original function, it looked like a desert fortress, a castle keep. A compound of small grey concrete buildings ringed around by a larger rectangular structure forming a squared-off U-shape, 3 sides of a square, with the fourth wall being visibly of recent construction, sandbags and quick-set fauxcrete. Soldiers dressed in loose but warm, cocky desert camouflage, heads wrapped in fringed scars against the bright sunlight, trotted briskly about the compound in pairs and trios. Ken was surprised by how clean and well turned out they were, in contrast to the more relaxed, scruffy attitude adopted by the military in Albany, New York, and D.C. He had expected things to get more and more informal the further out into the war zone he was. The general headed towards the part of the building which formed the outer wall of the compound, dusked the rusty spar with unconscious grace, emerged into a dark, musty, and nearly windowless stairwell, then turned and ran lightly up a set of newly installed aluminium steps leading to the top of the building. "We've modernized the place a little," she said. The roof was covered with asphalt and was clearly in extensive use. Walls had been erected around the outside, around which sentries patrolled rhythmically like the denizens of a medieval castle under siege. One corner of the U had been repurposed as a helicopter landing pad, yellow circles marked out in spray paint. Ken wondered if it ever saw much use, given the sparing use of air vehicles by the fuel-hungry seaboarders. The general had turned in the opposite direction and was hurrying towards the other corner of the U-shape, facing south. A small cluster of meteorological instruments faced southwest. She glanced disinterestedly at a couple of analog monitors before going to the railing and standing, looking out at the sand dunes. "Out there," she intoned, gesturing at the grey desert landscape, still cold despite the sunshine, "the battle zone. A couple of miles from here, the enemy." "Is this safe?" Ken blurted out clumsily. "For now," the general said. She paused to reset the scene. "The enemy," she repeated, "or perhaps I should say the enemies." She paused again. Ken said nothing, aware that Manders had slightly joined them. "We're not just fighting the red states," the general said. "We're fighting the weather, too. Lose more to the sandstorm than bullets, and would you believe we get malaria mosquitoes coming off the rivers every couple of times a year? And in the third place, after the weather and the reds, is the biotech. The fucking animals." And I'm going to stop there.
Wow, thank you for that very intriguing introduction. I'm sure everybody wants to know what will happen next. Thank you so much, Fiona. All right, I'd like to introduce our second reader today. Our second reader is Ioanna Papadopoulou.
Hello, I am Ioanna Papadopoulou. Oh, sorry, you need to do the introduction. I knew I would be the one that would make that mistake.
Quite all right. Ioanna Papadopoulou is a Greek author based in Scotland. Other than writing, she is a passionate art historian and museologist. Fascinating. Her debut novel, Winter Harvest, came out in 2023, and she has a novella, The Castaway and the Witch, coming out in 2025. Ioanna, over to you.
I'm really sorry. I knew I would be the one that would make the mistake. The moment you said it, I was like, I'm going to be the one. I'm so sorry. So hello, my name is Ioanna. I am a Greek author based in Scotland, and I'm going to read you the prologue and a little bit of the first part of my novel. And I just wanted to say, just before I start, that obviously it's Greek mythology. Greek mythology is not necessarily the most politically correct environment and world. So I just wanted to just mention that there is some mentions of incest, because the gods between them are siblings and also marry each other. And there's also some cannibalism of sort. So just preparing you for that. So, prologue. I told myself that letting my little brother run his rough hands all over me was simply an act of initiation and a way for him to gesture power. It wasn't me prostituting myself. Similarly, I told myself that making sure my womb clutched onto his seed and turned it into my firstborn child, my Corey, my Persephone. was an act of love. It was evidence of my need to become a mother and have someone to call my own. It wasn't an attempt to hold leverage against him. Sometimes, though, when I'm alone and I fall into the admittedly rare mood of self-criticism, I wonder whether I am lying to myself. Am I just finding excuses, the same as all my family has done for all the evil we have committed against others, even against each other? I am, after all, from a family of kinslayers. Winter. I remember light when I was born, fleeting and vanishing light. I was crawling my way out of mother's body, slowly realizing that this was the beginning of everything. Thoughts of my identity formed in my mind, and I could see that glorious light and wriggled faster to reach it. It was beautiful, it was powerful, and I was irresistibly drawn to it, so eager and willing to meet it and claim it as mine. But as I reached the end of the birth canal and mother's internal muscles helped release my head from her body, I was snatched away. Two powerful hands grabbed my head and pulled me out of mother, still wet from her fluids as a newborn. I never got to suckle on my mother's breast, to gain from her that powerful link of comfort and safety in life. I never got to feel her skin. Instead, I was lifted high and faced my father, Kronos. Our eyes met, and I was dumbstruck by his grandness. He was strong, beautiful even. The first thing I saw was him, and I was amazed by all the wonders the world offered, by all the bright light that existed in this world I had just ventured into, so much bigger and more interesting than the womb I lived in before. I was made of his majesty. We stared at each other, and I never forgot it. Then, just as I was getting accustomed to the light and was eager to start my life, to live under that glorious clarity of the world, Father opened his mouth and let me drop. I'm not sure if I screamed. It was cold as I fell into his mouth and landed on his wet, dark red tongue. He tipped his head backwards, forcing my small body to roll down his throat, through his esophagus, ensuring I had no chance to escape this new dark place. The esophagus was tight, and I squeezed and choked in it until I reached its end and fell to a lightless pit in which I was sentenced to spend the rest of my life. I lay down there for a moment, all alone. It was bigger than the womb I had been in before, so much bigger, and that extra space made it worse. I hated it, because it made me feel smaller, weaker, and cold. I had little concept of the world, of feelings, and even less of my situation, but I knew it was all wrong. I began to cry, wailing because I was so afraid, so helpless, without any option to save myself from that misery. All I could do was cry. That feeling of vulnerable loneliness didn't last. Not long after, I felt arms around me and a low but constant warmth of power that was like my own. I have been so lonely, a sweet girlish voice said. She didn't introduce herself, nor explain how she was there. She simply held me tightly in her embrace, keeping me safe. She never let me go. The embrace lasted my childhood. I was lucky and blessed to be born second. Hestia, my eldest sister and firstborn to Cronus and Rhea, was there to offer shape to the dark. Her body was my bed, my food, my home. She placed me against her girlish flat chest, and I felt her divinity burn inside her. Pressing my head against her bosom and listening to the core of her power helped me realize my own existence. Through my close examination of all she was, of the flicker of power and divinity that resided in her, even though Hestia's shriveled without sun and nurture, I felt my own self and my own power, a spark that humans might call a soul, but my kind called divinity. I stayed in her hug for days, years, or maybe centuries, listening to her body and being grateful for its ability to give shape to the nothingness that surrounded us. Time did not exist within our pit of darkness. During our childhood together, I wished I could see her face. I wished I could learn her features, understand her form, and see how similar or different we were. Soon, I learned to look through my hands. Each time I felt she had a nose or eyes, I was scared. She was like Father, the one who stole the world and all its light from me, the only face I had ever seen. You are like him, I said once when I first ran my hands over her face, not able to hide my hate for it. Why are you so much like him? Hestia kissed my forehead and caressed my hair. Father? She asked. I was surprised she wasn't angry at my words. Her voice and body changed then, as if by having this discussion, Hestia was forced to take a new self. Her chest slightly rose with breasts, and her figure grew fuller and curvier. She took my hands in hers and guided them over her face, and then down her whole body. She repeated this act, allowing my hands to familiarize to her new shape and memorize all her new details. Then she lifted my hands and placed them on my face. She guided them over my body. I too possessed the nose, lips, and all the features she did. The image of Father's face flashed in my mind. I too was like him. Are we monsters? Hestia chuckled in the darkness, and I went back to her body, hugging it tightly in need of the comfort it gave me. No, sweet sister, she said. Not yet, at least. And I'll stop here.
That was fantastic. We were riveted. Thank you so much for your reading, Ioanna. On to our third reader. Our third reader today is Jennifer L. Hart. USA Today best-selling author Jennifer L. Hart writes books bursting with small-town sass, steamy romance, and supernatural shenanigans. She can recite every episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, line by line, and has been known to add coffee to brownie batter for extra oomph. Jennifer, over to you.
Thank you so much. Hello, and thank you so much for having me today. My name is Jennifer L. Hart, and I write paranormal women's fiction, or PWF for short. If you haven't heard of PWF, it's a combination genre that includes contemporary fantasy, paranormal romance, cozy mystery, and women's fiction. Most PWF focuses on characters over 40. This excerpt is from my new series, Pages and Potions, Book 1, My Midlife Magic Days, Chapter 1. Oh no, Rue breathed as she set the newspaper down. Jody Haversham is missing. Who's Jody Haversham? Hattie didn't bother looking up from her computer screen. Rue tisked. Oh, honestly, Hattie, you remember Jody. He comes in every now and then and pokes around the occult section. Lives in that apartment above Mrs. Otis's barn. I hope he's all right. Rue pushed her chair out, but I gestured for her to stay where she was and set about collecting our dinner plates. He probably took off with some floozy. Hattie's pale eyebrows formed a steep V over her sharp nose, her attention fixed on her spreadsheet. I don't think he's the sort, not if you're talking about the man I'm thinking of, I added and turned the hot tap water on in the sink, hoping it would cooperate. Mid-60s, about 5'11", walked with a cane, all white hair and twinkling blue eyes. He was a gentleman, always tipped well when I got him a coffee. Staring at my reflection in the window above the sink, I wondered how someone would describe me on a missing bulletin. Mid-40s, brunette, with eyes that looked green when I wore green and blue when I wore blue. Average bust, larger than average backside. Classic pear shape, easy to overlook. No tattoos or piercings other than a single hole in each ear. Nothing special, no identifying features that would make me stand out in a crowd. Sometimes I wondered if I blended in too well. You're perfect, Glimmer Ridge whispered in my mind, making me fumble with the sudsy skillet. There was a unique feature. The house talked to me. More than that, it made me feel. At times, it was a comforting presence. And late at night, that rich, smoky voice sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear. I told the Bramblewick sisters about how Glimmer Ridge spoke to me, leaving out the odd sexual thrill, hoping they knew something about it. They'd exchanged another of those long, loaded looks that meant I'd stumbled into unknown territory. There are such things as spirits of the house, Hattie had said at length. Oftentimes, a house will take on characteristics of its inhabitants. It's why you should always treat your dwelling with respect. But if Glimmer Ridge is a spirit, why can't I see him? I asked. Who knows, sweets? Rue had done a one-armed shrug and changed the subject. Long story short, they thought I was nuts to believe Glimmer Ridge was a person, and that was coming from the Coven elders. Peachy. How do they know he's missing? Hattie asked, breaking me from my reverie. Mrs. Otis said he didn't pay for his rent the first of the month. All his stuff is there, including his car, Rue fretted. The police are looking into it. Speaking of the police, her gaze slid to me and I barely bit back a groan. Not again. Deputy Harding stopped by when you went to the bank earlier. Rue spoke in a tone that made my spine shoot straight. He was asking about you. Was he? I whispered faintly. Art Harding was one of the 7 single men under 70 in Miss Glen. Rue loved nothing more than playing matchmaker. Yup, he asked if you might want to go to the movies with him sometime. Her tone was just a little too casual to be believed. Rue, Hattie began, she's not interested. Well, why not? Rue huffed. Emma needs to get out more, and he's such a nice young man. Hattie made a gagging noise. Kiss of death right there. You might as well tell her he has a great personality. Besides, since when does Emma need a man? She doesn't need one, but maybe she wants one, Rue sniffed. And he's been carrying a torch for Emma since she came here. Hattie shut the laptop with a snick. And doesn't that strike you as a little odd? Why can't he sniff around a woman who wants him back and leave our girl alone? Rue planted her hands on substantial hips. Just because you're an old sourpuss when it comes to the affairs of the heart doesn't mean Emma's in the same boat. Well, why don't you ask Emma? Hattie snapped in a tone that brooked no nonsense. Let her decide for herself if she's interested in the man. 2 graying heads swung in my direction. I hated it when the sisters fought, especially if it had anything to do with me. I'm not sure I'm ready to date. Can I think about it? Oh, of course, sweets. No pressure. Rue was the soul of understanding as she picked up a tea towel and began to dry. Hattie just smirked and opened her laptop once more. Rue chatted about the upcoming full moon revel being held 2 towns over and who she expected would turn up. I finished washing the dishes and then headed into the store to go through the closing routine. First, I locked the front door. The sign hadn't worked since the night I'd arrived at Pages and Potions, so there was nothing to flick off. Next, I wiped down the counters and set up the coffee and tea service for the following day. I strode through the bookshelves with a microfiber cloth, eliminating dust and hunting for anything out of place. The children's section, the room that once upon a time had been a sitting room overlooking the front yard, typically required the most straightening. I plugged in the vacuum and pushed the ancient thing over the world map rug, and then arranged the beanbag chairs and oversized pillows. We had the kindergarten class coming in for story hour the following day, and I wanted everything to be perfect. After stowing the vacuum, I paused to admire the mural I'd done of the Jolly Roger drifting amongst the stars on the interior wall, one of the few that wasn't shingled. If I was proud of anything over the last 5 years, it was that mural. Would the child I'd given birth to like Peter Pan as much as I did? My hand covered my scar right over the ache that throbbed deep inside whenever I thought of my baby. The not knowing chipped away at me day by day. Had my child survived? Somehow, I didn't think I was supposed to. Who had done that to me? To us? Frazzled, I turned around to replace a handful of bodice ripper romances, which definitely didn't belong in that room, and almost walked into him, or rather, through him. Mother Moon! A hand flew to my chest as I studied the ghost. Roughly 5 feet 11 inches tall, with a shock of white hair, he held a cane. His once blue gaze appeared muted, along with his chalky pallor. The intensity that I recalled remained, and it fixed on me. Emma, the ghost of Jody Haversham murmured, I need your help. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
That was a fantastic reading. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you.
What a great variety we're getting today. A little bit of this and a little bit of that. Very nice. Just the way we like it. Our fourth reader today is Valerie Valdes. Valerie Valdes is co-editor of Escape Pod, as well as the author of the Chilling Effect trilogy and space fantasy novel Where Peace is Lost. Her short fiction and poetry have appeared in Uncanny Magazine, Magic: The Gathering, and several anthologies. She lives in Georgia with her husband and children. Valerie, over to you.
Hello, friends. Thank you all for being here. Today I'm reading from Where Peace is Lost, which is a space fantasy novel, as mentioned. It's basically a road trip in which a group of motley crew tries to rescue a planet from a giant robot that is attempting to destroy stuff. And so I'm reading from chapter 3. I forgot to start my timer. Sorry about that. But reading from chapter 3, in which our heroes have begun their expedition and are on a boat in a swamp. Their progress continued, the sun arcing northward, its rays sparkling on the surface of the water where the trees didn't cast shadows. Sometimes the vegetation thinned and spread out. Other times it closed in tightly enough to form a viridescent tunnel. Savvy asked questions about the area, especially what kinds of dangers lurked around them, and Luna gleefully explained about the pockets of noxious gas that could pop at any moment, or the acid-skinned herbivores that floated about slurping up algae, or the poisonous glowing bugs that emerged at night, or the predators that folded their long legs underneath them and hid among the arcing roots of certain trees, then leaped up to snatch birds from the air. Savvy told her own stories about other planets and their flora and fauna, to Luna's immense delight. They were hoping to leave Loth with the next seasonal ship, to find work as a pilot or mechanic on Eucorin Station, and they soaked up all information about the wider galaxy like a drying cloth. Kel recognized many of the places mentioned with varying degrees of familiarity, and felt wistful about not contributing to the discussion. She had stopped herself from regaling Luna with her own tales over the years, so she wouldn't reveal too much about her past and invite unwanted questions. Perhaps she'd been trying to keep the memories at a distance out of selfishness as well. Dredging up the names and faces of those she'd lost was akin to wallowing in the thick muck that accumulated around the trees and shorelines. Certain people swore it had healing properties, but to her, it was a cold mess. "What tongues speak you?" Savvy asked in faintly accented Zeopran, startling her from her thoughts. Kel stared at Savvy as if she didn't understand. If she hadn't told Luna anything in 5 years, she wasn't going to let Savvy goad her into sharing after a few hours. "What language was that?" Luna asked. "It sounds like Raspel's taste, tart and crunchy." "Zeopran," Savvy replied. "I can teach you a few phrases to pass the time." She switched to Fojali. "Maybe no one else knows where you came from, but I intend to figure it out. I think this game is fun, you know." "Do you?" Kel thought. Her expression remained fixed, blank as a new scriber. "I like to win," Savvy said in Oyaric. "If I continue to try, you'll shit the cod eventually." Such a charming turn of phrase, Kel thought. Savvy did have an impressive command of languages, though she had to admit. Was there any chance she spoke Stellan? No, she was more likely to know Dominari. "Will you ask where the nearest toilet is next?" Dare asked Savvy in Bathonian. "Suck an inflamed testicle," Savvy replied in the same language. "Oh, that was lovely," Luna said. "What does it mean?" "It means I'm getting thirsty," Savvy said. Kel choked on her own saliva and started to cough. A slow grin turned up the corner of Savvy's mouth as Kel spat into the water. "Bug," Kel said. "I'm sure," Savvy replied dryly. The low background hum of the engines cut out, and the skimmer slowed. "Friend Kel," Luna called, "we've got some clingers. Could you pull while I take care of them?" "Sure." Kel pulled one of the guide poles off the side of the boat, lowering it into the water to test the depth. Deep enough that she'd be underwater if she went overboard, but not by much. The currents flowed generally east or southwest, so she couldn't stop pushing, or they'd drift in the wrong direction. Unlike the rivers to the north, these flows were gentle enough that she didn't have to overexert herself. "Dare," Savvy said, "why don't you use your big sword to help with the vines? It'll go faster." She made a whooshing noise and waved her arm in a chopping motion. "I'd rather not get it wet," Dare replied coolly. He didn't bother looking at her. Hard to avoid the wet around here, Luna said, occasionally pausing for breath as they hacked at the vines stuck to the hull just below the air rings. I'll manage, Dare said. Luna huffed out a laugh. I didn't mean it as a challenge, friend Dare. More that there's no sense fighting the inevitable. I told Kel the same when she got here. You live with the planet or against it, and one way's more miserable than the other. They grinned at Kel. I can say wise things sometimes too, yeah? When I'm not rambling about whatever's in my head. Kel smiled and continued polling. But you're delightful, Savvy said, shading her eyes as she stared in Luna's direction. Dare can be charming too when he wants to be. Otherwise, he's a stick in the mud, like that one Kel is using. A closed mouth catches no flies, Kel murmured. A chuckle made her look over just in time to catch Dare smirking before he turned away. She thought no one could hear her. Spirits, what a voice he had. Went straight to low places. The dart of a shadow across the deck caught her eye. A bird, except they'd been avoiding the vehicle and its noisy passengers. Another shadow passed, then another, circling. Kel confirmed her suspicions before she slid the pole out of the water, then took a deep breath to center herself. Take cover, she said. Blade beaks. If they were careful, the problem would be a mere nuisance. Without a word, Luna stopped their task and sheathed their machete, pulling the tarp over the benches. Come on, they said. Hide! The hiss of gunfire behind her startled Kel. She turned, mindful of her pole, to glare at Savvy. Got one! Savvy kept her pistol raised, scanning the sky. Hard to tell how big they are from a distance. As if that single shot had opened a locked door inside her, Kel was flooded with a sensation she'd never thought to experience again. The intense, all-consuming urge to protect. It was both utterly strange and agonizingly familiar, like the taste of a childhood meal, or the scent of a long-dead loved one. She straightened and threw her shoulders back, her grip on the pole tightening. Where peace is lost, may we find it. You should get under cover, Kel said, forcing her voice to be quiet and calm. Blood makes them frenzy. And Savvy had already hit one. Hopefully it had gone straight into the water. Savvy ignored her, while Dare drew his sword and thumbed the trigger that collapsed its sheath into the hilt. Its black finish absorbed light rather than reflecting it, futhite alloy, which meant it could cut through the deck if he wasn't careful, especially in a space this tight. His face was flat, calm, as if his emotions had drained out of him, an expression she'd seen often enough on soldiers to recognize it as battle readiness. Kel longed to simply issue orders, but she doubted either off-ward or would take them, and who knew what they'd think of her if she fell into old habits. Blessed stars, the hardest part of being a bodyguard was dealing with a disobedient body. Kel pulled her hat off, letting it hang on her back from its string as she peered at the sky. A dozen of the bright red creatures wheeled above the skimmer, with more farther away, waiting. They favored fresh meat, but were happy to steal it after it stopped moving. 2 more shots from Savvy. One blade beak flapped awkwardly away, clearly injured. The other dropped to the deck, a splatter of purplish blood slowly spreading around the corpse. The rest of the flock went wild. And that is where I will leave it.
That is indeed an excellent place to leave us hanging. I mean, mean, but, I'm totally on board with that. Fantastic reading. Thank you so much, Val. Our 5th reader today is Shveta Thakrar. And she's coming up now. Shveta Thakrar's debut young adult fantasy novel, Star Daughter, was a 2021 Andre Norton Nebula Award finalist, and her second and third novels, The Dream Runners and Divining the Leaves, take place in the same universe. Her adult fantasy novella, Into the Moon Garden, is available as an Audible original. I can't wait to hear this.
Thank you for having me. The Divining the Leaves is the 3rd standalone in my YA Magical Night Market triptych, and it comes out on March 4th. And it is also my enemies to friends book, because I thought we don't have enough platonic friendships between boys and girls in YA. So I'm going to read the first scene and then jump ahead to the end of chapter 1. Chapter 1. The bright green sassafras leaves above Riddhi Kapadia's head. Well, first, to start my timing, sorry. The bright green sassafras leaves above Riddhi Kapadia's head whirled in a sinuous dance with the brisk early March breeze, whispering secrets to those willing to take the time to listen. Me, thought Ridley. She paused, the entrance to her woods a few tempting feet away. I'm willing to listen. Any other day, she would have dashed through the slight gap in the trees to write in her journal, maybe embellish the words with purple and white crocuses she'd pressed between the silver-edged pages with the hope of channeling those secrets. Any other day, she'd sit nestled in the dip at the base of her favorite sycamore, the one overlooking the trickle of a stream, and fill her lungs with the fragrance of the forest. Daydreams of that scent would swirl through her, dyed in sun-lacquered grass and clover, and textured by wonder tales and poetry. And later, at her desk, Ridley would strive to reimagine it as a wearable perfume for her online shop. Any other day. But that day, she had an audition to get to. As she hurried on, twigs cracked under her shoes, and the spongy moss that carpeted many of the rocks and decaying wood did its best to lure her close. Ridley could picture a thick clump of it pillowed beneath her head, soft and fluffy, perfect for a nap. She'd been too wound up to sleep the night before, her Bharatanatyam routine looping in her mind. The spot had recently opened up on the elite local team run by the lauded Varsha Reddy, and Mummy had wasted no time wrangling Ridley an audition. Not only would that look good on her college scholarship applications in the fall, her parents had gushed, Mummy, a former competitive dancer herself, couldn't wait to see her daughter follow in her stylized footsteps and perform on stage as part of a troupe. Ordinarily, Ridley never would have agreed to try out. She had no desire to dance for other people. One glimpse of Mummy's hope, and all Ridley's defenses had crumbled. Mummy wanted nothing more than for her lonely daughter to find friends and belong, like she had. How could Ridley let her down? Her beloved trees must have sensed her frazzled nerves, reviving her, their presence as reassuring as a river of sunlight. Only she could sink into their comforting embrace. This particular wild grove, half a mile from her house, had been Ridley's sanctuary for as long as she could remember, speaking to her through scattered magic. An acorn hollowed out just enough for a rolled-up clandestine message, a dew-beaded spiderweb shawl an Apsara might sling about her shoulders to ward off a chill, even an iridescent blue morpho butterfly that had mysteriously appeared on a bush like a goblin queen's emissary, nowhere near its native habitat. One day, she was certain, her woods, so reminiscent of the stories of the mythical Yaksha kingdom and its marvelous capital city of Alakpuri, would lead her there. The sooner, the better. Right then, the effect was spoiled by the half-crushed juice bottle someone had tossed into a beauty berry bush, directly below a faded no littering sign. Never mind that the recycling bin was a handy 2 steps away. With a sigh, she bent and took a hold of the grimy bottle's peeling label. No fair, a guy's voice slurred, spooking her. My turn. Ahead, half hidden where the dirt path began, a college-aged couple was sloppily making out. The woman held a can of beer out of the guy's reach. You can't have it, she taunted. When he groped for it, the contents sloshed over his head. The rest of the 6-pack lay at their feet, and, as Ridley knew from experience, the cans would soon replace the bottle. Ever since the convenience store had moved into the adjoining lot, its customers had taken to treating her woods like a dumpster. Not even her trash walks could keep up with the mess. Ridley had tried petitioning the city council to designate this copse as a nature preserve. They declined on the grounds that Atlanta already had ordinances in place to protect its famous canopy of trees. It wasn't like she disagreed. Parks were well cleaned and cared for, and wandering the leafy streets where she'd spent a good chunk of her 17 years felt like strolling through an arboretum, rich with crab apples and persimmons and pines that lent sparkle to the dreariest of gray days. But these were her woods. They always would be. Hey, the guy yelled, where's my wallet? Someone stole my wallet. The woman shrugged. Don't look at me. Judy dropped a discarded bottle into the nearby bin. Behind her, the boughs rustled once more, just as if in thanks. Her phone beeped. It was Mummy. You'll be fantastic. Remember to ask after Risha Auntie's health. She's very traditional. I know, Ridley texted back, laughing. Mummy had given her the same advice that morning, and the day before. Mummy might actually be more anxious about the audition than she was. Again, the urge to stay put tugged at her, but after a last wistful glance at the trees and the refuge they promised, Ridley continued along the street. Unlike her woods, the trees there were waking from their winter sleep. When the wind blew through their mostly bare branches, she shivered and burrowed deeper into her velvet coat. Hints of the luminous soft in the lessening of its chill, and the tightly coiled buds that would soon unfurl into verdant leaves and chromatic flowers. She wished she could pluck those hints from the first stirring breaths of spring and dab them on her wrists like one of her natural perfumes. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead from there to she's gone through her dance routine now, and When the momentum, sorry, here we go. By the time Ridley reached her front yard, the sun was gliding into the golden hour. Familiar sight of light pouring over the wise old oak tree, as thick as glistening honey, soothed her. She wrapped her arms around the oak's ridged bark, feeling its slow pulse, and sank right into her favorite fantasy, the one where the tree's branches settled on her shoulders and stroked her hair, where it gifted her its wordless guidance, where it invited her to leave the mundane realms behind forever. With the momentum of the day draining off, Ridley's eyes still hugging her tree, she dozed. When she awoke, a branch above her head glowed gold in her vision. More than a rainbow's worth of gemstone leaves glimmered along the wood. Rubies, carnelians, topaz, emeralds, aquamarines, sapphires, amethysts, rose quartz, each meticulously detailed with veins and stems. Her mouth dried up. As far as she knew, only the Kalpavriksha, the wish tree of legend, the tree that had anointed Aranyani as a protectress of forest, had foliage like that. Ridley blinked, and the branch was gone. Her tree was just her tree again. Beyond it, however, everything had changed. Her front yard, no, her neighborhood, had given way to a vast and sweeping forest. Like dancers wearing elaborate headpieces, the voluminous trees and bushes boasted a bounty of vibrant blossoms and enticing fruits. Some existed here on earth, or, as her grandmother called it, Prithvi. Others, though, were impossible colors and textures, dreams made reality. Gold and silver-plumed larks warbled love songs, their feathers shining ornaments against the boughs. On the horizon, majestic blue mountains pierced the sky. No decay, no disease would dare trespass on this place. The wealth of greenery wasn't anywhere she'd been. It was somewhere else, or something else, somewhere else. Ridley didn't move in case she frightened away the vision. Awe lit up her insides, as lush and deep as the golden hour. The Yaksha kingdom, could it be? A breeze redolent with floral essences bore a single leaf toward her. Ridley opened her palm to receive it. Gradually, inevitably, the cordate leaf came to rest there, striated with the pinks and oranges of sunset and rimmed with gold. As it made contact with her skin, the forest receded. Afraid that it, too, would evanesce, Ridley gingerly rubbed the gleaming leaf between her thumb and finger. Unlike the branch, unlike the forest, it lay there still. Solid, real. This had to be the invitation she'd been waiting for. It had to be. And if it was, that meant magic, at long last, was coming. Thank you.
I think magic is here in your reading. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Shveta. Sadly, we are almost come to an end, but we do have one final reader. Our final reader today is Anne E.G. Nydam. Anne E.G. Nydam has been creating imaginary worlds since she could hold a crayon, while focusing her wide-ranging curiosity on linguistics, nature, teaching, and more. She lives in New England, where she makes relief block prints and writes books, short stories, and poetry celebrating wonder, joy, and hope. Anne, take it away.
Thank you, Elaine. I'm just going to dive right in. The Home for Dispossessed Familiars. Trudy had certainly never intended to found the Home for Dispossessed Familiars. Indeed, she hadn't even wanted a pet. It was with bafflement and dismay that she opened the door late in the afternoon on the Monday following her great-aunt Gert's funeral to discover an extremely flustered young lawyer holding a large pet carrier draped in a tattered blanket. He had to raise his voice to make himself heard over the hair-raising yowls emanating from the cage. "Gertrude Manny Clark?" Trudy nodded. The lawyer practically flung the carrier to the floor in Trudy's doorway, where it rattled and shook, its yowls redoubling. "It's yours," he exclaimed unceremoniously. "Left to you in the last will and testament of your great-aunt Gertrude Manny, completely legally binding." Then he was down the porch stairs so quickly, Trudy could practically hear no backs in his retreating footsteps. She stared at the shrouded object on her floor, and after a moment reached forward cautiously and twitched aside the corner of the blanket. Immediately, a viciously clawed paw shot out, swiping at her hand, and the huge gray cat hissed. "Grimalkin?" she yelped. "Great-aunt Gert left me her cat? I don't want a cat. I'm allergic to cats." Grimalkin hissed again, glaring at Trudy with fiery yellow eyes. Here's the illustration of him. She took a deep breath. She could handle this. She'd always been fond of Great-aunt Gert, and Grimalkin had never attacked her when she'd visited the old woman. She summoned her most authoritative glare and faced the monster, hands on hips. Well, I'll tell you one thing, Mr. Grimalkin. You're not coming out of that cage until I can be sure you've settled down. The tail lashed, still puffy, but at least he'd stopped howling and hissing. You want some water? I've probably got a can of tuna in the cupboard. The tufted ears twitched. Ah, you know the word tuna, I see. Well, if you know the words chill out and don't attack me, maybe we can get along. She turned away to find a bowl for water, but froze as a hoarse voice muttered, Of course I know those words. I'm not stupid. Slowly, she turned around, staring at the cat. The cat was staring at her. They both spoke at once. You said that? You understood that? Grimalkin broke the shocked silence, sounding as sour as he looked. Great, you're a witch. And I suppose Gertrude meant for me to be your familiar now. Let's keep it all in the family, right? Witch? Familiar? Wait, are you saying Great Aunt Gert? Never mind. No, I am definitely not a witch. You can talk to familiars, so you must be something. Get a little training, and in no time you'll be enjoying your newfound witchdom. You're a wizard, Harry. Whee! No, absolutely not. I don't want to be a witch. I like my job, and I have no desire to spend nights on a broomstick. As far as I'm concerned, you are free to find some other witch to familiarize for. Did Great Aunt Gerd have a coven or something? You can go join one of them. I wouldn't take any of them as a gift. And yet I'm supposed to take you as a gift. Anyway, I told you, I can't have a cat. I'm allergic. Not to me. What, are you some fancy purebred hypoallergenic breed or something? Yes, familiars are a special breed or something, duh. We're magic. So if I don't want to be allergenic, I'm not. You always made my eyes itch when I visited Great Aunt Gert. I had to keep up appearances. But you'll notice I went easy on you. I always went easy on Gertrude's friends. On the other hand, I can dial it up for unwelcome visitors. He gave Trudy an evil grin. Never mind. This is all beside the point. The fact is, I'm not a witch, and I have no desire to become one. So I'd be happy to take you somewhere where you can be a proper familiar and live happily ever after. Where do familiars usually go when their witch dies? Nowhere. Nowhere? Grimalkin shrugged. Being a familiar isn't like a job at the convenience store. Special magical bond for life. Blah, blah, blah. Then he added more quietly, sometimes bereaved familiars head south and just see how far they get. What, you just die of a broken heart or something? Well, I wouldn't have put it that sentimentally, but basically, yeah. So what's the point of Great Aunt Gert giving you to me if you're just going to die anyway? Another shrug. You're family, and you're obviously magic, so maybe she thought there was something you could do. Trudy could tell Grimalkin didn't appreciate warm fuzzies, so she tried not to show the sympathy that squeezed her heart in spite of her irritation. She said, if you're not long for this world anyway, you may as well stay here. No allergies, though. And you can tell me what food you usually get, but I warn you that I teach elementary school, so I am perfectly familiar with all the tricks children try on subs. She gave him the look reserved for kids she suspected were up to something, and his whiskers twitched sheepishly. She went to find the can of tuna. When Trudy got home from work on Tuesday, Grimalkin was nowhere to be seen. She dropped her bag on the table and went to the sink for a glass of water. That's when she saw the monster cat in the backyard, near a crow. Hey, she hollered, charging out the back door. Grimalkin, no, I will not have you hunting birds. Both Grimalkin and the crow turned to look at her, eyebrows raised, something they managed even without proper eyebrows. I appreciate the concern, the crow said dryly. Trudy, meet Collie. She's an acquaintance. And a familiar, I presume, said Trudy, looking ruefully at the water she'd sloshed all over her pants. Yep. So, to what do we owe the pleasure? The two familiars glanced at each other. Grimalkin answered gruffly, she was just saying goodbye. Trudy gave them both the special look that was simultaneously sympathetic and no nonsense. It worked like magic on fourth graders with troubles, and it worked now. My witch died, Polly said, so I'm going to start flying south. But I thought, Grimalkin stated meaningfully, that she could stay here. Trudy tried not to let her sigh show, but how could she say no? You're welcome to stick around, Collie. But if there was supposed to be anything special I could do for Grimalkin because I'm related to his witch, it obviously won't apply to you. But at least you won't be alone, feeling sorry for yourself beside a bunch of palm trees or something, Grimalkin urged the crow. Do what you want, Collie, but my home is yours if you need it. Trudy went inside to change her pants. That night, she had 2 pets. All right, I will stop there. I will add that my giveaway is a few copies of the ebook, and I do want to point out that this book is very heavily illustrated throughout, so the ebook version can't have the same formatting as the regular version, but the content is all there. So that's my giveaway.
That was delightful. Thank you so much, Anne. And I can definitely vouch that it is a wonderful book to have in your hands with all of those illustrations on every page. Thank you, everybody, for your fantastic readings, and thank you so much to my excellent audience.